We spoke previously about Ukraine and our predictions of how things might go. I made an argument that was not made very clear by myself, so that's my fault, which is that I don't think Ukraine should be utterly destroyed and annexed into Russia or anything of the sort. It's just that I don't think the West cares about Ukraine and are going to do nothing if it does come to that. And I think I might be right. Anyway, I brought some map technology recently on After Effects and decided to play with it and made a thing about Ukraine, so I thought, might as well get some money out of it, so let's play the clip I made. This is Ukraine. Or at least, it was Ukraine. After the EU revolution, Russians in the east, with Moscow's backing, rebelled against what they saw as a Western coup, declaring separatist people's republics under the banner of New Russia. In the chaos, Russian forces secured the Crimean Peninsula and annexed it into the Federation. Ukrainian support for joining NATO in response has risen. Russia in response has built up troops on the border and issued demands to NATO that Ukraine never be allowed to join. In case of invasion, Russia also has the advantage of an allied Belarus and support from communist separatists in Transnistria. How NATO responds will seal Ukraine's fate. Anyway,
That's amazing.
That's a summarization there of the situation on the ground, which, ain't looking great. But I was planning to make like a short animated video from this, about 5 minutes, just explaining the whole thing. And then I realized like the editing, by the time it's done, Ukraine might not exist. So I thought we'd just do it here instead. So that's a situation on the ground, but people might be wondering, how on earth did we end up here? And just to preface this off for any Ukrainians or Russians watching, I'm probably going to say something that you might not like, or you think I should have mentioned this instead of this, or phrased it in the wrong way. We're Westerners. Please no shoot. We might get some stuff not as perfect as maybe we should have, but we can try our best. Anyway, without further ado. So I thought we'd roll the clock back to at least World War I, because got to start somewhere, and this seemed opportune, at least. So you can see here, after the collapse of the Russian Empire, you can see Ukraine there being noted as a place that was also full of civil war and hell. And the socialists ended up taking over and all that, and the Soviet Union annexed most of it into the Soviet Union. As the Ukrainian Socialist Federal Republic. Anyway, the funniest part about the Civil War, and I just have to mention it because I think it's funny, is the Black Army. So if we go to the next one, people in the West might not know about this. So this is the anarchist army that was siding with the socialists up until the socialists were like, yeah, anarchy's cringe, and put them up against a wall. Anyway, the flag here I just find really funny. Like, what are we going to do for the flag? Skull and crossbones. On the top there, the word death. And then, and at the bottom is just death to those who stand in the way for freedom of workers. And it's just like, okay.
Freedom.
Right. That's how you know you're the good guys. We've got the death flag.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I'll give them that, but it's really something. Anyway, also to mention the next thing I found cool. There should be a Tachanka in there. But anyway, just Tachankas, which are machine gun chariots, which used to be used during the civil wars in Russia and Ukraine, which I find funny. But of course, the socialists took over. And when the socialists took over, they did their policy of collectivization. As you can see here, some propaganda promoting it. And what happened there? Yeah, if we go to the next one, Holodomor. Holodomor happened and millions of people died. Ukraine recognizes this as a genocide. I think most Western countries recognize it as a genocide.
They do.
And Russia's a little bit like, a lot of people died. It wasn't on purpose, which I think the argument for the Russians is that they weren't targeting Ukrainians. So don't know what to make of that. But the Russians also believe, yes, a lot of people were killed needlessly. So there's that, of course. But if we go to the next one, we have World War II as well, which again, Ukraine suffered terribly. And I'm trying to go across the point here that, quite frankly, Ukraine, in the terms of history, is definitely a victim country, especially in these last 100 years. As you can see, like, huge disaster, civil war. Okay, then huge disaster, massive Soviet takeover, and everyone starves to death. Now huge disaster, the Nazis have turned up and killed everyone. And then, of course, the Soviets take it back and kill everyone again. So it's just like, oh, dude, kill me.
Just one thing after the other, isn't it?
Yeah, absolute horror show. So if we go to the next one, this is where we get the update with the borders. So this is the announcement from the Soviet Union in which they moved control of Crimea, the peninsula, which is connected by land, it's not an island, to Ukraine. They moved it from control of the Russian Federation to the Ukrainian Federation. Of course, no one really gave a toss because both of them are in the USSR. So it doesn't really matter at the time. The quote I saw used for this is, "It makes absolutely no difference to the owner in which of his pockets he is accustomed to carry his valuables." Which, yes, it does not matter at the time, but of course will in future. So if we go to the next one, there's also the next disaster in Ukraine's history, which is the graphite on the roof, which isn't on the roof, they swear. Chernobyl.
Yes.
Yeah, anyway. And then we'll move to independence, just to try and explain the history here. So that's just the hell that is Ukraine's last 100 years. But then they get independence, and this is one of the first things they did, as you can see, Radio Free Europe listing here, the destruction of Ukraine's nuclear arsenal. If you could scroll down on this, John, because there are some really just stark pictures of them blowing up like the missile silos and whatnot. So just keep scrolling, like this one here. They're just blowing up a nuclear missile, which is just, and then a silo there just getting destroyed, which is just, I mean, it's amazing. It's a hell of an achievement as well to achieve nuclear disarmament in Ukraine. But it did come with some caveats. It wasn't done because Ukraine was, I don't know, bored or couldn't pay for the nukes necessarily, but they wanted security. So if we go to the next one, we can have the agreement here. So this was the agreement signed by the parties involved. And as you can see, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Russia, United States, and the UK were signed up to this. And in here, they agreed that the UK, the US, and Russia would respect Ukraine's borders and not use force against Ukraine. Yeah, that didn't last because we know what happened, so we'll ignore that for now. But anyway, yeah, that part of the treaty has been dropped since in respect of reality.
Yes.
Yeah, anyway, so if we move on, there's also the fact that the Russians, of course, still had half their fleet in the Black Sea and nowhere to put it. So they needed a port, and Crimea being the place where you put this navy, they paid rent to Ukraine for the Sevastopol naval base, and that's where the navy used to be. And of course, the Russian navy and whatnot was still there, leading up to the annexation. So then this sets the stage for the Ukraine crisis. So if we go to the next one, we then have some insight here as to the divide within Ukraine, which we can see. So if you scroll down on this one, you can see the map there. So let's just pause it there so people can see the faces of the two candidates and the map, because that's the most important thing. And so the situation here is you've got Viktor Yanukovych versus Viktor Yushchenko. We're just going to call them Yushchenko and Yanukovych because it gets confusing otherwise. And Yanukovych being the, let's say, pro-Russian guy, and then Yushchenko being more pro-EU, pro-Western. So in 2004, they have their election, and as you can see by that table there, the country is quite divided along pro-Russia, pro-Western lines to some extent, let's say. And of course, most of those people living in the East, a lot of them, a hell of a lot of them, speaking Russian, not speaking Ukrainian as the first language. So cultural divide too. So Yanukovych alleged that the election, when it came through, was rigged because Yushchenko was reported to have won, and then there was some investigation, and apparently it was the case that he had rigged according to international claims. So we'll leave that there. I think the Ukrainian Supreme Court ended up saying that as well, but I'm not 100%, so
right.
Don't steal me. But if we go to the next one, you can see the Orange Revolution. So this was the people coming out in support of Yushchenko against Yanukovych, in which they say the election is rigged, we need another election. They had another one, and the pro-EU candidate, Yushchenko, won. And yeah, it didn't go perfectly, though, because there's some complications in this revolution. And if we go to the next one, we have The Guardian at the time reporting on the fact that the US was behind quite a lot of it. Not in the case that they are behind the whole thing, but instead they are supporting this movement to try and make it flourish. That's also a complication we're going to run into, which is that Moscow or Washington are both going to have an interest here, and therefore, if there's anything going on, they are going to be wanting to be involved. That doesn't necessarily mean they're behind the whole thing, but it could also be the case that they are for certain things. As to what extent, we won't know until 100 years from now, let's say. But we do have some information in here, for example. So The Guardian writes, the Democratic Party's National Democratic Institute, the Republican Party's International Republican Institute, the US State Department, and US Aid are the main agencies involved in these grassroots campaigns, as well as the Freedom House NGO and billionaire George Soros Open Society Institute. He gets into everything, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. Funny
does.
that.
Anyway, yeah, so they were the ones helping the Orange Revolution there, as it is called, because a lot of these types of revolutions get their color names. And that's the case. Whether or not it's obviously true that there was rigging or not, whatever. But there was another complication as well, which is if we go to the next one, the pro-EU candidate Yushchenko here being poisoned in the middle of all this. And if we can scroll down some more to show people the face, John, it's pretty serious.
Oh, goodness me, yeah.
Yeah. He obviously blamed Russia for this because he thinks that they're trying to kill him, which, yep.
You think he's not implausible, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. Anyway, but then we go to the next election, and again, just hitting on the keynote points here. We don't have time to go into the complexities of Ukrainian politics nor the knowledge, but we can look at the divide yet again. So if you scroll down, so we can have the faces and the map once more, you can see the same divide in the country, and you can also see now Yanukovych being the candidate, against this other lady here, whose name I can't pronounce, so I'll leave that there. And she's the pro-EU candidate, he's the pro-Russia candidate, and he won. And this time round, the international response is there was no rigging. So
Right.
the understanding is that he apparently won just for being popular, and therefore, fair enough, whatever.
Okay.
That's how the protest should work. Except 4 years into his presidency, so the next year there would have been an election, after 4 years in, the European protest started up because he tried to get an aid deal with the Russians. Moscow offered him basically loads of cash in a form of aid. And this looked obviously like he was trying to strengthen ties with Moscow and move away from the EU and the West and becoming closer and closer to
Yes.
Moscow. And therefore, a lot of the proponents of being closer to the EU and the West were quite upset about all this and started their protests. So if we go to the next one here, we should have some image of the protests. So this is what is referred to as the Euromaidan protest, which a lot of people may remember. I remember growing up watching, the news and watching all this take place.
Yeah, I recall this.
Yeah. And so this is loads of people turning up with Ukraine flags, EU flags, protesting that he is doing this. And it turned into a bit of an S show. So if we go to the next one, it turned quite violent. You may remember. And we ended up with police officers defecting, joining the protesters, random sniper shots apparently going off and killing
Good
police
Lord.
and protesters, which still hasn't been resolved. No one really knows what the hell happened with that. And, well, okay, absolute S show. And it led to Yanukovych stepping down and the country kind of falling into a mini civil war there, or at least the abouts of a civil war, which then did take place. And it is known as the Revolution of Dignity, apparently, which I don't know who makes these names,
That's
but okay, whatever. I also do
Yeah.
like the riot shield being.
That is something to be looked into. I'm not quite sure where dignity comes into this, really. Well, I understand where dignity would fall on both sides, but why the conflict is called that,
Anyway, but it's the second revolution in this small period of history here. And then, of course, in the absolute chaos, there are huge amounts of Russians who are also in the eastern part of Ukraine, or Russian Ukrainians, who are very upset about all of this and think this is some kind of Western coup. Which you kind of, there is an argument to be made that it very much looks like that to some extent, because the EU was openly supporting the protesters who led the revolution. Senator John McCain and some other Democratic senator turned up to offer their open support. And then God knows what Washington security agencies were doing.
You have the legitimate institutions and bodies and parties
Yes.
supporting an undemocratic cause, arguably.
But also at the same time, it's not to say that Moscow isn't, of course, working with Yanukovych to try and suppress the whole deal.
That is true.
So,
But the accusations could work both ways, can't they?
but you can see why Russians or Russian Ukrainians can have their perception of events. That's all I'm trying to say there. Anyway, so then in the midst of all the chaos, if we go to the next one, we have Russia turning up, and as you can see at the bottom there, annexing Crimea, just taking control of it. And then in Donetsk and Luhansk, you have the armed insurgencies and then pro-Russia protests and whatnot throughout the other regions. And you can see it's basically the same as the election map. The exact same provinces having the same problems or the same upset because their guy that they voted for has just been deposed. And, well, of course they're mad about that. Anyway, moving on. We may remember about Crimea as well, that there were just little soldiers who turned up at first. Apparently they came through the Sevastopol naval base.
Oh,
So
okay.
remember they were renting that?
Yes.
And then, well, if you have a foreign army just stationed in you, well, and then they want to take your territory, that's the way they're going to do it. So that's the little green men, also the little green men you find in Ukraine.
The
as
men
well.
without insignias.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the way the story goes, I read it again to make sure, but it was just like they turned up in the parliament. It was just like, yes, vote to join Russia, and they voted to join Russia. Well,
Russia it is.
yeah, well, they declared independence and then held a referendum, but it's kind of by the by because we all knew where that was going. And Russia just annexed Crimea into the Federation, as I said. And if we go to the next one, you may remember the cute grill. So this is the meme that a lot of people have shared, and this may recall a lot of people's memories. The girl on the right there, who was like the chief prosecutor or whatever. If we go to the next one, there are a lot of memes about her as well. I don't know if you can... I know we're not on Wikipedia anymore, but there's a lot of anime about her and fan art about her because she captured attention. There's like this really serious situation going on. Everyone's just like, yeah, but cute girl. Anyway, moving on. So let's go to the next one here, which is just the war carrying on and has been ever since. It has been largely ignored by Western countries like ours because it's so far away and we don't really have many interests in Ukraine in exchange for, say, France.
Yeah,
So
especially not since we left the EU. No.
yeah, it's a hell of a fight, and has continued to go on, and is still going on. It's my understanding. Anyway, but we'll go to the next one, which is where the story kind of picked up where we dropped it, which is that Russia decided to issue a bunch of demands, and they're very mad about NATO's encroachment into the east, obviously, getting into ex-Warsaw Pact countries, or even Soviet countries in the case of the Baltics. And this is all in Russian, so we'll not stay on this, but if you want to go and find the original, you can find it there. And if we go to the Guardian article who lists these, they have some demands in here, which were obviously not going to be met. So article number 4, NATO must move its forces back to 1997 NATO borders.
Which is where?
Which is back to not the Warsaw Pact nations. Because,
Right.
Poland and Baltics have all joined. No,
No, that will never happen.
this is not going to happen. So that's kind of a moot point. So they knew that was never going to be agreed to anyway. Article number 6, Ukraine can't join NATO. There has been murmurs from Ukraine wanting to join NATO or want NATO protection, which I don't know how the US feels about that. From what I've seen, the American right certainly doesn't want it because they don't want the entanglement, which,
No.
fair enough. In the UK, we're not too fussed either.
I think it would be a dangerous political strategy.
Yeah, and article number 7, no military action in Ukraine, which is, if you could die from irony.
Yeah.
Like the Russians being like, there should be no military action in Ukraine from anyone. It's like, dude, you're literally in Crimea now. Okay, whatever. So if we go to the next one, we can see some of the build-up, which you can see here. So this is some satellite photos that emerged, I think it was earlier this month. You can see just the level of, I assume that's all vehicles there. And it's just piles and piles. If we go to the next one, there's some other aerial photos here of all the other build-up.
That's a whole military base.
Yeah, they basically just propped up on the border and were like, yeah, we're issuing demands. Also, they're not joining NATO as presumably a threat to make the West at least agree to that point. Or military action, as everyone is quite worried about.
Yes.
Anyway, moving on. So if we go to the next link here, I don't know how seriously to take this, but it was said and is amazing. So this is a Times article titled, Russia wants urgent answer to its demands over NATO withdrawal and Ukraine tensions. And NATO isn't, because get stuffed, I guess, is the response, because some of the demands, as the first point, for example, seemed completely unreasonable to NATO. And there's a quote in here, which is from Russian state media. So Russian state media warning viewers that the two powers could go to war. Quote, either they, NATO, step back voluntarily, or we will make them do it by force. And Russia makes no guarantees about the survival of Ukraine, especially as a sovereign state. Maybe we really are on the eve of war with NATO. So,
yeah, that's a pretty harrowing threat, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, kind of an open threat there. But again, it is a threat on Ukraine fundamentally, which is that if you let them join or defend them, well, then we're at war. And they belong to us, which is their perspective on this. So,
Yeah.
just laying that out anyway. We can get Ukraine's response to all of this, which is fair. So, the Ukraine's Twitter account, verified checkmark, types of headache, migraine, hypertension, stress, living next to Russia, which is just total pain constantly, which you can see why they're upset too.
Yeah.
Which is, living
No,
with that.
100%.
Yes, anyway, so let's move on. So we have the UK response, which is largely who gives an S about Ukraine. I'm not unsurprised by this, and this was my prediction last time I spoke to John about this.
Yeah.
You can see the headline here. UK troops will not be deployed to Ukraine to defend against Russia. That's our foreign minister speaking there, and I think the defense minister as well.
We just don't have anything to gain from getting involved.
Yeah, we made no guarantees to Ukraine. They're not a member of NATO, so that's the response. Just not our problem, which you can understand, of course. And if we go back to the tweet on this, you can see I can't remember his name. So if you go back, John, so close this. You can see Tobias Elwood, who I believe is the chairman of the Defence Committee in the UK Commons.
Yeah.
So, of course, having quite the insight, or let's say interest in this. And he's upset because he thinks we've given the green light to Russia there, which we kind of always were. I mean, this is the other part that I find strange when people are like, they're threatening to invade. We must show we should do something. It's like, dude, they already did in Crimea.
Yeah.
And then
I mean,
Donetsk and Luhansk.
Barack Obama quite literally drew a line in saying, you do this, there will be a retaliation. And he did nothing
Yes.
on
But
our
also,
behalf.
also the entire West, like, to say that if they ever do anything in Ukraine, we'll be outraged. It's like, well, they already have twice.
Yeah.
So,
And are doing so on a daily basis.
and we've still not done anything. So
Hence why we're not reporting on it.
that's why I'm not
I
hugely
imagine.
surprised. Anyway, if we go to the next one, we have the German response, which is a bit mixed, let's say. So Germany says Russia will face massive consequences if it invades Ukraine. This is mixed, of course, because what are those consequences? Military. No, because they're not the Third Reich. They don't have the army for it.
Although they'll just withdraw from the pipeline deal, maybe.
Probably not. Probably
Actually,
just,
yeah, you're right.
probably just more sanctions.
That'd be far too much of a threat. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with gas prices being what they are in Europe right now. We're having a crisis for the Americans who might not know. Gas prices are going up incredibly high, and that's gas. You know, the gas that's a gas, not a liquid. Yankees. Anyway, moving on. So let's go to the next one, which is just the response from a Lithuanian diplomat who says NATO must arm Ukraine to repel invasion by Putin's Russia. And this is why I wanted to cover this as well, especially quickly, because as I said, Ukraine might not exist if he does go through with all this in the next few days, especially with Christmas and Boxing Day coming up. I mean,
That's no exaggeration.
if you want to pick a day in which the West is most distracted, I mean, you've got
If you had your military mindset on, you would think this would be the perfect day to catch the West off its guard.
Yes, and there is also the fact that Russian Christmas is in January, so
And that.
you're not even hurting your own side there. Anyway, so that's the response from the people most close to Russia, who are, of course, saying that we should reply with military force. The Germans, who are like, yeah, and then the British, who are like, nah. And God knows what the Americans think. I haven't seen an American response, except from commentators, political types like Tucker Carlson, for example, who just are not interested. And, well, this is what I said would probably happen. And it seems to be.
The main problem is Ukraine, as you showed, are not a united nation on this.
No.
Like they're very much cut in between of what future or which superpower, if you like, they see themselves with. And given that you have that ambiguity of what is in the interest of Ukraine, how could you possibly, as an outsider, look on and know how to act?
Yeah.
Especially when it could come to the cost of your own. Well, we of course, well, need I mention Salisbury, even though of course we have to Salisbury, yes, we have to keep an open mind on that. But is there really any benefit in us actually prodding the Russian bear anymore?
I look at it as just what is going to be the response rather than the arguments for and against if I can. And it seems to be one of, from the West, not going to bother, which is that's just how it seems it is going to go by what has already been said. Just saying that and leaving it there, because I do not want to get an argument about what's the right thing to do, because oh god, there's a million people with a million opinions, and I'm sure you can leave them in the comments and let us know what your opinion was. Anyway, moving on. The last thing to mention here, which I mentioned in the short video in the intro, is Transnistria, which I just really wanted to talk about because
Transnistria.
I never get a chance to talk about this because why would you? But it's a meme country, like unironically. So
like Kyrgyzstan.
More real.
Oh,
so this is a segment of Moldova, which I guess used to be part of Romania, but then because World War II and all that. And there's loads of Russians living there. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, well, all the Russians were like, well, I don't want to live with the Moldovans. I want to live with the Russians. And so they've declared their independence as Transnistria, or however you say it in Russian. There's a Russian word that's different for it. But in English, we say Transnistria, apparently. And as you can see there, I mean, like, they're stuck in the 1970s in terms of imagery. So you can see a lady here, for people listening, standing behind a Soviet flag, in which it's the flag of Transnistria with a hammer and sickle in the corner. Because this is the imagery they kept. If we can scroll down, John, just to show some of the like random images you find of Google Images for this. I mean, like that sign there that's just up with the hammer and sickle. It's got like a sign that's like, what was it, from 1939 or whatever to 2017.
So when were these? What, 2017?
Yeah, it's still there. You can go there right now and go, wow, I don't know.
You'd think this was 1957.
I don't know if they need vaccine passports to visit this place. I imagine not. I think they've got bigger problems. But if you keep going, you can see like the statue of Lenin there, which is quite famous. And,
God, that is tall, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all still up. And
there's a plinth, but then there's that.
One hell of a meme place. Obviously recognized by Russia, but very few else people in the West recognize this.
Yeah,
it's certainly something. And if we go to the next one, I just wanted to mention a video that perked my interest in this, in case you want to know more about such a meme country, which is Bold and Bankrupt's video on it, which is nice and insightful. I quite like Bold and Bankrupt. Do you know Bold and Bankrupt?
I've come across him a few times.
Yeah. His obsession with Soviet stuff is obviously quite. I don't know if there's another word for it except like cute and annoying way, where he's like, oh, look, a Soviet glass. Oh, look, a Soviet payment. It's just like, dude, everything can't be Soviet or nothing's Soviet. Anyway, but he goes around there and has a whale of a time showing you what it's like. But that's the situation in Ukraine, which very well might end up getting invaded. The response from NATO so far seems to be,
we don't know what to do.
Or just, we don't care, in the case of the UK. And, well, if that is going to be the response, then, well, it's up for the Ukrainians and the Russians to decide what their future is going to be. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this video, which Carl and John Wheatley did together, looking at the politics of Star Trek and whether or not it's socialism or liberalism. And the answer may surprise you. So go and check that out. And if you'd like to get updates on everything we produce on the site, you can also follow us on getter.com with lotuseaters_com being the @. Thank you and goodbye.